I mean, what do you think? You think they stand a chance? You're on their side, aren't you? Who are you betting on,
Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?
Look at these lies.
One shall stand, one shall fall.
Even if one of them survives.
The only way to stop him is to make another movie.
Welcome to The Celluloid Mirror, a film discussion podcast presented by 4 Mile Circus, a media services company based in Brooklyn that produces original films, videos, podcasts, and more. On each episode of The Celluloid Mirror, we pair 2 very different films to see what they reflect about each other and the audience watching. I am one of your hosts. I am Nicole Solomon.
And I am the other one of your hosts, Sean. Starts with an M. Mannion? I think?
Sure.
That's probably close. That's close enough. And today we have 2 guests joining us, Janet Kim and Karen Wang of the Guilt-Free Features podcast. Janet S. Kim is a Brooklyn-based director, photographer, writer, and producer. She has created and produced content for various clients such as NBC, HBO, Amazon, and Sesame Street. Her narrative work has screened at festivals throughout the United States. Hi, Janet.
Hi, that's a me. I do those things sometimes.
And Karen Wang is an award-winning writer, director, and producer of films. She has served regularly on the juries and curation teams of a number of screenwriting competitions and film incubator programs over the past 15 years, while her own narrative work has been featured at festivals throughout the United States and Europe. Hi there, Karen.
Hello. Hello. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining us on this day after Christmas, with the after Christmas, whatever that is
it
people.
Boxing Day?
Yes,
It is
I believe it's Boxing Day. And
Yeah.
people,
1 year ago today, I was getting ready to go see Cats right now.
Cats. Oh, wow. That is something to remember.
It is. I remember it well. I remember it well. We'll say that.
not necessarily fondly, just you remember.
I remember. Memories are precious.
Speaking of movies that you have to be not sober to see.
On today's episode, we're how to describe it? Let's just start with a little explanation of what we're doing. We're doing something. It's a little bit different than what we usually do on the show. Usually, we're taking very different films that, like, why would we combine The Exorcist and It's a Wonderful Life? That's Crazy Pants. But this time, what we're doing a little bit of a sequel. Earlier this year, we joined Karen and Janet on Guilt-Free Features for just a wonderful time talking about Nick Cage movies, Face Off and Con Air, for CageFest. And so we thought, let's have Karen and Janet on for our new show, and we can do CageFest 2.
Woo-hoo,
and so
CageFest, even cagier.
Because a little bit of Cage is just never enough. So we are talking today about The Wicker Man and National Treasure, 2 just terrible films, just awful films. And so first what we're going to do here is we're going to give a quick synopsis of each film, outline the primary connections that we see between them, and then we're going to share our own reactions before diving into some analysis of the shared themes between the films, beyond just the caginess of them, and how much Cage is Cage in the cage that is those films. So
if I might interject, Sean, I think it's kind of, besides both being terrible films starring Nick Cage, they are also part of, CageFest 1 was about the summer of Cage in the 90s when we were blessed with Face Off and Con Air in one single summer. And then for about 10 years afterwards, we were blessed with a lot of Cage cash-in films, where I think a check for Nicolas Cage is another piece of commonality about what drew him to these two projects. These two disparate, in some ways, projects. That's one of the points of unity there.
Absolutely. The fact that he owed a lot of money and needed to make a lot of money. And so we have so many Cage films from him just needing to make some money.
Starting franchises, rebooting franchises, all the franchises in Cage in the 2000s.
So much. So let's start with some synopses.
Synopses?
A very sophisticated way to start a podcast, yes.
I think so. Maybe we should start with Karen. Would you like to tell us a little bit about National Treasure?
Sure. Okay, so I will try to keep it as succinct as possible. It starts off with Benjamin Franklin Gates, a.k.a. Nick Cage, who's on an expedition in the Arctic Circle with a band of people to help him on this expedition, including his right-hand man, Riley, who's just a font of quips and, snarky comments. And his investor / fund guy, otherwise known as Sean Bean. In the movie, his name is Ian, and he ends up being his nemesis in the film. Anyway, they find this ship buried in the ice called the Charlotte. Actually, let me rewind a bit. Oh, God. Okay, so Benjamin Franklin Gates comes from this family of conspiracy theorists / historians who are descended from people who were involved with the Founding Fathers / Knights Templar in the 1700s during the Revolutionary War. When Ben was a young lad, his grandfather, played by Christopher Plummer, tells him the story of the Knights Templar and the treasure that they buried somewhere in the United States. The treasure of the Knights Templar is basically consists of all these priceless artifacts and art from all of the ancient civilizations in the known humanity, including treasures from Alexandria, Egypt, Greece, Rome, all the things. And then were captured by the Crusaders / Knights Templar, a band of people from the Crusades known as the Knights Templar, who then eventually smuggled all these things out of Europe. I don't know how the many troves of things that I don't know how they managed to smuggle like literally a city full of treasures on a boat to the New World, but it happens, and they bury it somewhere, and wherever it's hidden, they made up this network of elaborate clues to eventually lead people back to the treasure if they wanted to find it, I guess. And the Gates family, aka Nick Cage's family, it's been their quest since the Revolutionary War to find the treasure, but they haven't been able to find it. And Ben is just on the cusp. And so adult Nick Cage finds the Charlotte, aka this ship that Christopher Plummer, his grandfather, told him about. He thinks he's finally on the right trail. He do find a clue on the ship. Sean Bean says, "Where's the treasure, Ben? Where is it?" Nick Cage says, "Well, it's not here. It's not on this ship. This is another clue." So basically, Ian tries to off Nick Cage and Riley. He absconds with the clue, and then the two of them become embroiled in this race against time to find the national treasure. And by the way, the next clue is hidden on the back of the Declaration of Independence. And so, so the rest of the film is them trying to steal the Declaration, keep the Declaration, find the messages that are hidden on the back of the Declaration of Independence. How many times can you say Declaration in this movie? I don't know. And that's basically it. It's a cat and mouse game between Ben and Ian for the rest of the film. Oh, and Diane Kruger makes her way in there at some point as well, and becomes the love interest along with Nick Cage. Ta-da!
Thank you for that heroic feat. of just making sense of that convoluted ass, like...
I mean, I feel like I just watched it all over again.
I know. I had so many flashbacks of when I was playing my drinking game, and even in the synopsis, I would have been hammered. Because she said declaration 15 times.
Well, before you do get hammered, Janet, would you like to tell us about The Wicker Man?
Okay. So The Wicker Man... Sorry. The Wicker Man starring Nick Cage in 2006 was based on the original horror film Wicker Man, which has a similar premise. Nick Cage plays a cop who who goes through some traumatic event in the beginning of the movie where he witnesses a station wagon with a mom and her child being smashed in front of him for some reason. And then he gets a letter and he spirals downwards, and then he gets a letter from an ex-girlfriend who's like, come, I can't find my daughter. I live on this weird island. And so he, for some reason, instead of ignoring it, he decides to track down the postage stamp. Anyway, he decides to track it down, and he does. And they happen to be, and it's an insignia of a honey hive, a beehive, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's a really secluded island. They don't like outside people, and somehow manages to find his way onto the island where like he is very unwelcome. And it turns out all these ladies run everything, and they live in this very Mormon-esque society where they call each other sister, and then their name is the plant name. So Nick Cage's ex is named Willow, and her daughter is named Rowan. I think they probably ran out of trees, so whatever. And so the whole movie is him basically ham-fistedly trying to find this child. And it turns out, can I give spoilers?
Yes,
is that a
please
thing?
do.
Yes.
Okay.
The show's a spoiler. It's
okay.
fine.
Spoiler warning. It turns out that Rowan is his daughter. And so there's really no explanation as to why he has been brought back to the island. But it turns out that there's a huge ceremony and he is a part of it. And there's a thing called a Wicker Man at the very, very end where he actually like climbs into it and is burned alive. So I guess that's the thing. The original movie inspired Midsommar in a really, 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 really big way. Christopher Lee is a cult leader in the original Wicker Man, and it's a mixed, I think it's like a normal cult makeup of men and women, I guess. I don't know. They're probably all still dressed like Mormon Island people, but whatever. And
A normal cult.
a normal cult.
Right.
But this one is all... But the biggest difference that the director and playwright Neil LaBute made was that, it's all ladies and all the men are mute. And so there's that. Very interesting. He's so progressive and doesn't hate women at all. So that's a thing. And it ends with him being burned alive, and then his ex and another young girl are seen at the end of the movie with with James Franco and Jason Ritter at a bar, and they're picking them up to lure them again. And it's just, that's it.
And the young girl is played by Lily Sobieski.
Yeah. So that happened. That happened. That movie happened. There's a lot of
Sure did.
Yeah.
It exists. We all saw it.
I know.
It wasn't a hallucination.
I mean, I kind of wish it was. I got really stoned. So I got drunk for National Treasure because I had to. I had to stop the movie 10 minutes in. And then I texted you guys and I was like, I can't do this sober. I need a drinking game and I need to have some buzz going before I start the movie again. And then I got high for the other one because I was like, I can't get drunk again for 2 nights in a row.
Wicker Man gets boring if you don't have something to help you zone into the not particularly well executed visuals and whatnot. There's stuff there, but it's not presented in a way that I might expect with competent filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah, it's very much a theater director directing film.
The only thing I found really filmic about Wicker Man were all the really pretty long shots of the scenery that Nick Cage walks against, but that's pretty much it. I mean, but that could all be B-roll stuff too. You know, it's like, yeah.
I was gonna say, good job, second director, like unit, like what is it? Second unit director,
second unit, yeah,
for real. So, so in terms of connections between these two films that we watched, they are both films, starring Nicolas Cage. These two examples of Cage's 2000s genre cash-in period both revolve around cults and or secret societies. Those aren't the same things, but there's overlap between those things.
Yeah,
cults are.
There's a lot of like codified language that both groups use and weird symbols, and
he's also like searching for something. Like he's like definitely
in
looking.
pursuit.
Yeah,
there's a mystery at play.
Yeah, and the films interestingly seem to have kind of opposing views of the mysterious groups that fuel their plots. National Treasure is pretty in love with the Freemasons. Wicker Man's pretty scared of whatever that cult was called.
Ladies. It's called Ladies. Yes.
It's just called being afraid of women.
Yes. I also feel like the two movies in terms of those roles were two sides of the Indiana Jones coin. Like National Treasure was him being Arkansas Smith, i.e. bootleg Indiana Jones, and then like doing the swashbuckling thing. And then Wicker Man was like him being like, you know, the academic Indy, where you see Harrison Ford in the bow tie and the glasses. And I was just like, oh no.
So if we combine them, it's just a new Indiana Jones movie. Let's just cut
Arkansas
them together.
Smith.
Yeah, Arkansas Smith. Excuse me. You're right. Well,
Arkansas Smith, the much more patriotic and misogynistic Indiana Jones.
With a range of hair colors just for men.
Well, before we dive into a little bit more about what we thought and feel, although I think that's already coming through, let's take a little break for an ad, and then we'll come right back from our capitalisming and talk more about how great these movies are. Amazing. That was amazing. What amazing advertising, and we're all really thrilled about whatever it is we just advertised. Welcome back to CageFest 2.
Yay, thank you for having us.
So let's take a few minutes to talk. We already started talking about it, but I think we all have maybe a little bit more to say about watching these movies and how we feel about the movies before we get into like breaking down all the culty stuff. Would anybody like to start sharing some feelings?
Feelings. Well, besides exhaustion and befuddlement, because I won't lie, I watched both of these films for the very first time last night, both back to back.
Oh no!
Merry Christmas, Happy Christmas
on Christmas night.
I'm so sorry.
And I rage texted Janet through both of them. So I guess, yeah, so there was rage. There was confusion, rage, and exhaustion. just what you want on Christmas.
I felt like I ran headfirst into a mental block. Like I was like, oh no, like there's a part of my brain that had evolved. And so I was just like, man, I had 10 working brain cells. And then when I started watching National Treasure, I had 5. And then those 5 begged me to go get liquor. So I did. And I was just like, because I have a distinct memory of being on a plane in the before times and trying to watch the National Treasure movie on the plane, because it's like a perfect time on an international long haul flight. You watch terrible movies that they offer. And I couldn't get through like 10 minutes of it. And I was like, oh, maybe I was just tired. But I wasn't. I had taste. and so I just remember stopping the movie, and then I got a lot of wine and I got sake, and then I drank that. I was hammered 30 minutes into the movie, and I was very glad to be hammered. I And then I had to stop drinking an hour and 15 minutes into the movie because I was that drunk. Because I'm not a big drinker. I'm not like, that's the other thing that people should know is that I don't have a high tolerance and I don't really drink a lot. I do like to drink, but like I just can't handle that much, and that's okay. I'm happy with that. And yet I somehow managed to make it like 2/3 through like a bottle of Lambrusco, which I also don't really drink, but felt the need to. So that was a thing. I don't know. And so then the next night when I watched Wicker Man. Sorry, I see mental blank. Like my brain cells are trying to protect me. I was just like, I can't get drunk again because that was a lot of drinking. And so I ended up getting stoned, for which I was also very grateful. Like just viewing them both through this like hazy lens of inebriation was a very excellent choice on my part. Because I was like, I feel numb to my emotions right now.
That's fair. I think, yeah, definitely do what you can to protect your own mental health, because I was so angry. I was so angry like 12 minutes into National Treasure.
Didn't I text you also? I was like, Karen, I'm
yes,
so
you did.
drunk.
Yes, you had already run to the bodega and fetched your alcohol and texted me about it.
I had to
and you were
warn
like,
you.
You're like, I couldn't make it through 30 minutes of this film without drinking. And I was like, oh, God, what am I in for?
I had to warn you. I was like, Karen, don't do this sober. You have children.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, too, is like, I don't really drink either. So I did the whole thing stone cold sober late at night by myself.
Oh, no.
That's a lot.
Oh, no.
It was a lot. But I had had coffee before, so at least I could stay awake.
I mean, is that really a benefit?
Yeah, I was going to say, I fell asleep. I was so drunk that I fell asleep on the last 30 minutes of National Treasure. So I had to like chug some water and go back and watch the last 30 minutes because I was like, I don't know what's happening right now. Why are they at a mansion?
I almost told you to abandon ship at that point when you were like, I fell asleep. At first I was like, just stay asleep. Don't come back to it. But then I was like, but the last 30 is that part where it's like under Manhattan. There's just like miles and miles of treasure.
Like,
yeah.
And tunnels and
that nobody found.
Seriously.
That nobody's
found. Nobody's
state secret.
No subway digging. It's like
Right. And also just like to go back to my synopses, how in the hell did the founding fathers, like what all like, I don't know, 100 families, perhaps 50 to 100 families smuggle that much treasure from Europe, which at one point, like, all that stuff could not have existed in Europe at one time either. So there was so much about the plot that didn't make any sense that I looking through my notes, literally every other line is just another question. What?
Why?
This
how?
Even just the name. Come on. Benjamin Franklin Gates.
Yeah.
I remember
his
the
dad,
second he...
Wasn't his dad's name like John Adams Gates or something? They're all
I don't know. His
presidents.
dad... His dad played by John Voight. That was another question I had.
So much crazy
like,
on screen at the same time.
So much of the budget must have been spent on just the casting alone. And I was just like, this is such a huge budget, because it looks like a huge budget movie, and it was, and it made a ton of money. But like the cast is crazy. I'm like, Harvey Keitel, John Voight, Diane Kruger, Christopher Plummer, Nick Cage. I'm like, oh my God. Like Sean Bean, all these people popping up. And I was like, what?
My notes are like, my first note, I'm looking at my page of notes right now. My first note is, who gives a shit who has the treasure? My second note is, ugh, John Voight. My third note is, Christopher Plummer is too good for this.
Yes.
Then, I'm having trouble caring. Then, ooh, I wish a zombie was in that barrel. I wish this was Return of the Living Dead. And it just kind of goes on like that. I had not seen either of these films until we chose them for this episode, and I watched them. I prepared. I knew these weren't necessarily going to be like yay Christmas movies, so I watched them like last month, both with some herbal assistance, because you can't. As Karen learned, you can't.
I did.
But it wasn't right.
Technically, I also watched them sober. But
God, Sean. Yeah, well,
But even just so much of the plot made no sense. Like they dug for all of 15 minutes in the Arctic
Yes.
Circle before finding the Charlotte. So
Yes.
the Charlotte was just there literally like 6 inches below the ice.
It was like a handful of snow under. Oh my gosh! Wow. The secret
and
lies
then
with
like
the
when they
Charlotte.
broke right. And then when they broke into the National Library to steal the Declaration of Independence, how did they know the intricacies of the entire defense system of like where the infrared sensors were? Like they didn't stake this out for years.
Congress.
Is
Right.
that information readily available?
Like all the motion, like all the cameras and infrared, like whatever, like that's all available for people.
No, of course not. But that was their explanation for it. I watched it. So I watched National Treasure like a year or two ago because we were looking for a dumb action movie. My wife and I we're like, we don't want to watch anything serious. We'll just watch a dumb action movie. And we saw that was there, and then we said, well, fuck it, let's watch this. Like, I was sort of vaguely interested in it before because I'm like, this just has that line, I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence, which is an entertaining idea. But nothing else about the movie was particularly interesting. So we watched it and it was just like, okay, that's dumb. It's dumb. All right. So I watched it again yesterday and I was trying to pay more attention because I was like, oh, we're going to talk about it. I almost didn't watch it again because I was like, I don't need to watch this again. But I thought, we might have to details and I don't remember them. And as I was watching, I was like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. This is really dumb.
It makes no sense.
But I also just was sort of semi-distracted because you only have to pay attention like once every 5 minutes or so to have. If you pay too much attention, it's confusing. But if you pay attention to like once every 5 minutes, or just be drunk, like you can go like, okay, that's what's happening. It's terrible in all the ways. And yeah, the Manhattan thing. I don't even think I thought about the Manhattan thing the first time I watched it, and this time I was like, how the fuck is that there? How is that there?
Yeah, right.
How is that
Manhattan's
there?
not that wide.
Also, how do they have any skills for stealing from the National Library, or the national thing where they steal
Smithsonian.
The National Archives.
National Archives. Like, how do they have any skills for doing that? They're not thieves.
Besides Riley.
But like
what does Riley
just
do?
like,
What is his thing?
He's just a hacker.
Oh, right. He's
Aren't
early
you glad we
2000s hacker.
rescued you
He's like-
from the cubicle you sat in? And I was like, well, how'd you fucking find him in the first place? Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck?
I found Riley's snarkiness to not be that entertaining.
No.
Like, I know he was there to be the comic relief, but he had his humor was at the level of like 12-year-old
Yeah, he was the dumb wiener kid
boy.
grown up.
Yeah. I will say this though about Cage. I mean, two thoughts popped into my mind whenever Cage was trying to decipher another clue, and he like monologues to himself, like trying to like, recite out loud what the clue is and make all these connections. And then he has all these aha moments throughout the film to lead him to the next clue. And, without those aha moments, he would never, the plot wouldn't move, right? So, number one, I kept thinking to myself, wow, these screenwriters must have been really proud of themselves. It just felt like the screenwriters were really proud of themselves whenever they pulled another piece. I'm like, oh, the Liberty Bell. Oh, like the Trinity Church. I'm like, oh, these clues are not that great. Like, it just, there's no way anybody, even a historian, would not necessarily be able to get them. They're so opaque and weird. I'm just like, what? So first of all, and then second of all, I'm just like, what was my second point? I don't know. There's just nothing made any sense. But my second point was that despite the plot and the dialogue and the clues not making much sense at all, Cage still has a preternatural ability to be super enthusiastic about all of it, even though nothing makes sense. Like he still manages to bring that energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that very Cage-esque way.
But I feel like he understood what was happening in National Treasure more than he understood what was happening in Wicker Man. Like, Wicker Man's crazy energy was more about just like, well, I understand what this sentence means, so I'm just going to do it the way that I do my crazy. And then with National Treasure, it was just like, well, I'm being Indiana Jones, aka Arkansas Smith, and so therefore I know where I'm going with this. So I didn't find a lot of his like traditional crazy like when he does the eyes, or like he has like I counted one moment, and maybe that's because I was drunk, but like I didn't really catch a lot of him.
Well,
Yeah.
I hear you. Because the dialogue in National Treasure is more expositional than anything else. It's not about character development. It's about plot points and getting you to the next point. It's all information that he's just trying to relay, right? Which is another reason why I feel like they didn't really give Diane Kruger much to work with either. Because I've seen her in other stuff, and she's been great in other things. And I know, Janet, you did not care for her performance much at all.
You know what it was? I think that, so one of my drinking game rules was, so can I talk really quickly about my 5 rules for National Treasure?
Tell us all 5 of the rules, please.
Our audience
Because people should need to know so that they can play the game too.
So the first 3 rules pertain to all Nick Cage movies. So you drink when Nick Cage shouts or yells. You drink when something explodes or is on fire. With Nick Cage, that's number 2. You drink when there's a prestigious actor on screen and you can tell they don't know why they're there except for the money. And then rules 4 and 5 are specifically for National Treasure. Rule number 4 is you drink when Freemason or Declaration is name dropped. And then the 5th rule is you drink when there is a historical figure name dropped. And then I had to take away rules 3, 4, and 5. Like 45 minutes into the movie. And I think,
or else you would have had to get your stomach pumped at the hospital.
I was just like, at some point I was chugging water in between sipping, and there's like cuts with like multiple cuts with Sean Bean. Like they cut around a lot of it. So like Sean Bean shows up at 5 different angles in the minute, and in a matter of like 2 minutes where they're talking about the Declaration. So they're not only showing Sean Bean and Harvey Keitel, and then they're also saying Declaration 15 times. I was like, fuck me. This is a lot. So anyway, all that to say, I didn't drink when Diane Kruger was on camera because I was already hammered, and she's in a lot of the movie and I can't handle more drinking. But I just felt like, I think maybe to your point, she probably wasn't used or gave her much to do, but I feel like she also, you could see behind her eyes, she's like, I'm getting paid $2 million.
Right. These lines are ridiculous, but I'm still going to try.
Yeah. And like, and same thing with like Christopher Plummer, like he was the very beginning, got to act with a kid,
Right.
And so.
Which, one of my questions was, so we're supposed to believe that this cherubic, angelic-faced, toe-headed child grows up to be
Nick Cage,
crazy Nick Cage, right? I was like, that doesn't track.
And also came from John Voight.
Yeah.
To both of your points, critical reaction to this film was very mixed. I think there's a lot of kind of love for it now in retrospect. People are like, yeah, it's a big dumb Nick Cage 2000 action movie that I have like nostalgia for, and there's some love for it now, but it's, what is it? It's like at 46% on Rotten Tomatoes, although the audience response is 76% fresh. So like it did well with audiences. It made a ton of money. It made almost $400 million across the globe. But critics were not fully on board, and Ebert, who we often use as kind of a barometer of like general critical response on this show, to many of Karen's points, Roger Ebert echoed a lot of the exact same points, saying that the central weakness of the story is the absurdity of the clues, which are so difficult that no sane forefather could have conceivably believed that anyone could follow them. But also points out that Cage, one of Ebert's favorite actors, is ideal for this caper because he has the ability to seem uncontrollably enthusiastic about almost anything.
Oh, God.
And also points out National Treasure is so silly that the Monty Python version could use the same screenplay line for line.
Wow. He was nice.
Yeah, I would watch a Python version of it for sure.
Yeah.
But you could just keep the exact same script. They just read the lines differently and like emphasize declaration differently. Like I can really picture it, and it's funny.
Well, yeah, the idea that they could carry around this 200-something plus year old document in a canister and traipse all over the world and jump and fly through things and like fall and whatever, and have it like thrown in the middle of the street and it doesn't immediately disintegrate, like that. And
it's the Declaration of Independence. It doesn't disintegrate. America. I will say, I do kind of enjoy his ridiculous logical leaps in the movie, only because, and I think I was texting Nicole and Janet about this yesterday, but only because it reminds me of the old Batman TV show and how Robin would solve the Riddler's absurd jokes. It's the same thing. It's like, well, he used this word instead of that word, and so it means this and that. And so it's like watching the old Batman show.
There's fun to be had, I think, in National Treasure. There's a lot to hate, including looking at my notes. I have a lot of angry notes about the cinematography and color grading. Apparently, I was not a fan of. I had forgotten, but
oh no, it looks terrible.
It's like an
editing is
ugly
awful.
movie. Yeah, it's just there's all this formal stuff where I'm just like, this is just so junky the way you chose to do it, and I don't like looking at it. It's not aesthetic.
It's weird though.
Did you guys watch the Krampus movie? It was just Krampus with like Adam Scott and Tony Collette a few years ago.
A year or two ago. Yeah, I watched it. Yeah.
Meant to.
Oh, okay. So Krampus basically, it's like the Nightmare of Christmas Krampus myth. And this family essentially gets trapped in a snow globe. That's the end of that movie. Sorry, I spoiled it. But my biggest critique for watching that film was it felt like the production design, they had no money for production design and basically went into the archives of the prop house at like the Universal Studio lot and just like, we're like, whoa, the holiday section just and like did a supermarket sweep arm into their cart. And that's what made Krampus / the entire movie. And I feel like with National Treasure, they just went to like the Disney World, like offshoot rides, and they just like grabbed all of that shit because it's not being used. And they were like, wow, this is under Cinderella's castle. It's never going to be used again. The Haunted Mansion is being decommissioned. Here's the old one. Just and that's how they made all.
It's funny. I'm glad you mentioned Disney too, because that was actually the next thought that I had, which is just that, well, it was a Disney film. It is a Disney film. It was released into theaters, meant for families. Was it a summer release? Do we know?
I believe so.
Think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like a big blockbuster summertime movie for families and probably 12-year-old kids who would have enjoyed Riley's humor, So, and 12 is also kind of that weird precocious age where kids are probably like, ooh, like Knights Templar, conspiracy theories, all this caper stuff and adventuring and Indiana Jones-esque type stuff. I mean, I guess it tracks. It makes sense. And then the plot doesn't need to make that much sense, I guess, for them.
Yeah. That's how that came to be. The Wicker Man, on the other hand,
oh man,
is trying to be about things in a different way, and
the script was better. I mean, at least the words that people were saying. And I think to his credit, he cast a bunch of really talented actresses who made that dialogue work. And I have to say that Ellen Burstyn really earned her paycheck. She elevates.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I loved her in that. I enjoyed watching her. There's a lot. Wicker Man's a weird one because I felt like National Treasure, I think I texted this to you, Janet, like National Treasure is more what it is. It's like, this is what we're doing. This is the kind of trash we're serving up, and we're going to do it.
Enjoy this buffet.
You're going to like it.
10 kinds of fries for your meals for the next 3 weeks. And then that's the National Treasure.
None perfectly cooked. Some are too soggy. Some are burned. But they're
some
fries,
are still frozen.
goddammit, and it's a lot of fries. Whereas Wicker Man is like, I mean, they went to Neil LaBute and were like, hey, want to do a Wicker Man remake for money? And he was like, yeah, I'm going to come up with a bunch of pretentious reasons why I can pretend that's something I want to do. And it's in a way, it's got more going for it for me than National Treasure does. Like, there's more that's interesting, but it's so, like, it's incompetent trash. Whereas National Treasure, it's doing what it's trying to do. Like, Wicker Man doesn't know what it's trying to do. Neil LaBute doesn't really know how to direct movies at all, I don't think. He especially doesn't know how to direct horror movies, which is part of why in really annoying interviews around this, he's like, well, I don't really see it as a horror movie. It's not about those dumb jump scares. The studio made me put those in, and like I didn't even know how to execute those properly. It was more about building dread, a thing that, no horror movie ever does.
And also he didn't do.
No, and also he did.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Like,
I was like,
I felt anticipation. I was like, when are they going to kill him? When are they going to kill him? When are they going to kill him? When are they going to kill him?
You know what I was realizing? So there's an infamous scene that's been cut out of this movie where they place a beehive over his head.
I wanted to
and
see
Nick
it
Cage
so bad.
is
It's in,
going,
like, the
the
director's
bees, go
cut?
the bees.
you have to buy the director's cut, though. I couldn't rent. I was like, all right, we're all doing theatrical, I guess. But the crazy thing is what we watched is my understanding, not even the theatrical cut, because after, like, okay, so this film was not screened for critics.
I wonder why.
Nobody knows why, obviously.
Shocking.
And, did not make money. Nobody knew what to do with this. Nobody wanted it. It wasn't what anybody asked for. And it just kind of sank, and then kind of got some life back as a cult favorite. But they recut it for release on DVD, I guess, to make the climax just less laughably ridiculous. Because there was, like, Nicolas Cage getting, like, a helmet of bees put on his head, and he famously yells, not the bees.
The bees, not the bees. I was really looking forward to that scene. I was like, oh, there's an anchor that I've been seeing gifed on Reddit everywhere, and it didn't show up, and I was so pissed.
Because they took that shit out, because they're like, oh, this is just ridiculous. So
I know.
But then I know, Karen, have you seen the original Wicker Man? I know Janet has not.
You know what's funny? I because I watched Wicker Man last night, I found it on Prime Video. And so both the original and the remake with Nick Cage are available. And when I first clicked on the first title that I saw, I accidentally purchased the original one.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's a much better
I did not
film.
watch it.
Yeah.
I haven't watched the original one, though.
It's when you watch it, you spoilers, like, to my mind, the most satisfying part of The Wicker Man is the end, where we get to see Nicolas Cage's asshole cop get burned to death. Like, I was like, yes, this is enjoyable. But the problem is that scene is so close to the final scene in the original movie. Like, there's nothing that was brought to it new here other than making the protagonist this specific kind of asshole you really want to see burn. But, like, it's just a far less competent, less cinematic version of the scene from the original. So I'm like, this is almost like a thing, but it's just such a pale imitation of something else. Like, why? I was just like, why your whole film? Why did you do it? Why did you do this to this property?
I feel like there's the difference between John Turtletaub, who directed National Treasure. I need to, sorry, my brain is like really like actively trying to make me blank these movies.
Oh, I didn't remember that film had a director. Like, yeah. It's fine.
But so I think John Turtletaub is like, he's really famous for directing these like big, sweeping, dumb, fun movies. Like, he did Cool Runnings, which is actually, to my recollection, a really fun film.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also directed Three Ninjas, which I remember as a child loving. Now it's highly problematic, but as a kid I was like, oh yeah, this is a great American. No, but then like Neil, and so I think he knows what he's doing and what his place is. He's just there to kind of like give you spectacle at the movies, which is like kind of an old school way to make film. It's like give him a little show and like what, right? And which he does. And then with freaking Wicker Man, like Neil LaBute worked really hard to fuck it up.
Yeah.
And he's I mean, I think it's also like really indicative of his arrogance. Like, he's just like, he's trying to say that it's deeper than it is, but it's really like, if you look at his plays and the other movies he's directed, it's like, oh no,
and yet he continues to work and get work, and you know, he's still regarded with a certain degree of esteem in the industry. Yeah. You know?
Because he can probably pitch like a mother, and his ideas are probably great on paper, you know? But I didn't particularly find his use of the camera that interesting at all. He lucked the fuck out in casting a bunch of really great theater actors who translate well on screen. And then he also lucked out in the fact that like he can write dialogue fairly well. You know, like the words that people were saying during Wicker Man, you could tell that they at least were like, well, this movie's weird. I have no idea what's going on, but at least I look good, and I also can say things that make some kind of sense to my person.
Ellen Burstyn's wig line though was pretty.
I was stoned.
It was, yeah. I mean, her wig was
it
at
bad?
a certain point. I mean, it evolves too. Like in the beginning, she has this like sort of gorgeously, like a gorgeous coif that's very elegant. No. It's all like pinned up, but in a very like elaborate and elegant way. But at the same time, like the wig line on her forehead is like very severe. And then later on, it's like all a flow, and like, you know, her tresses are like all around her, especially when she's like, you know,
on
when
the
she's
bed?
reclining on her bed. Yeah, I'm like, the hell is happening here? You know. So, but yeah.
I know. His hair was very bad in this. Like, I don't.
Hair plugs? I think it's hair plugs.
Was it hair plugs? I thought it was a weave.
I don't know, man. It was just, yeah. Ugh. Do we know what the budget was for this film?
Which one, The Wicker Man?
Yeah, The Wicker Man.
Hold on. I think.
Because like in the first act, it just felt very low budge indie to me.
It was
in that sort of 90s way.
It was shot like a cheap made for TV movie.
It felt like, it gave me the same feeling
purpose.
as yeah, it reminded me of Janet and I did an episode very early on in our first season where we talked about Wild Things, and then in a way with the way that the images are paired with the music, it's like sort of this very operatic epic string score, you know, in the way that, you know, Wild Things kind of has that like very epic sounding saxophone, and it just tries to lend more gravitas to everything. But I was just kind of like
according to Wikipedia, it had a $40 million budget.
So
40
and
million.
it made
38.8
total
in 2000
$40 million
internationally. Internationally,
Okay,
it made that much.
Yeah.
Like it didn't even make back its budget globally.
I mean, a lot of rom-coms were made for about 30 to 40 million around that time. So
It could have looked a lot better for that price.
that's true.
It's a filmmaker
Yeah.
who doesn't know how to make films, I think is what we're seeing. Didn't know how to spend the money well. Didn't know, I think as we're all saying, just didn't know what to do with the camera. Like contrast this with either the original Wicker Man or like Midsommar, which is an incredibly cinematic film.
Midsommar was so good.
with
Yeah,
similar
yeah.
landscapes, you know, like some similar visuals, but like this one takes it and makes it look like it's a like after school
Trash.
special or something
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
like don't. Also, this is one of the weirdest things to me about this film is that they decided to make it PG-13,
It's not a PG-13 movie.
but it was rated PG-13.
True. Like 13-year-olds would want to go see this.
No, this is not a teen. Maybe they were like, we've
Yeah.
got Lily Sobieski. She's a hot young actress. Like, no.
Well,
But
that
she
was
was kinda
also
like
the
on her way-
era at the time with like horror movies. They were leaning harder towards PG-13. Like this was in that like late 90s, early 2000s. They were like, no, the teens are going to see the horror movies, so we got to make more of them for them.
It's such a weird thing to do with this particular property, though. I mean, it's a different take on it than the original. The original is much more, there's a lot more sexuality on the surface, and it's a lot more about like different contrasting ideas between like this cult and traditional Christianity about sexuality and nudity and things like that, which is absent from this film. This is about some like uptight bitches, basically, I guess.
Yeah, there's so much misogyny in this film.
Why don't we get to see more about like their fucked up mating rituals and stuff though that are alluded to and supposed to be scary? But I'm like, I want to know.
Yeah.
Let's see that. We don't get to see that because
Yeah.
it's PG-13, and they just allude to the scary, like, oh, they're using the men for breeding,
Very
and that's it.
mythical women.
Yeah, and they're mute. Like how they had their tongues cut out. Was that what happened? Yeah. Because and then when he first arrives on the island and he's trying to find help and he is looking for Willow and they tell him to go up to the mating house.
Yeah.
That's where they direct him. I'm like, oh, is this a whorehouse? Like before I understood what was happening, I was like, oh, it's a whorehouse. No, this is not a whorehouse. This is some other kind of weird. Something else is happening here. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I had a weird experience with the film because I kept trying to make it make sense. And so I kept trying to read it as
Why would you do that, Sean?
Because I was trying to watch the movie because we were going to talk about it. If we weren't planning to talk about it, I would have just like sat back, been on my phone and just absorbed as much of the movie as leaked through, which happens with a lot of movies because a lot of them are bad. But I was like, okay, we're going to do this. So I was trying to engage with it. So I just kept trying to be like, oh, maybe the movie is, I don't think they're not doing this on purpose, but maybe the movie is accidentally about like this sort of blundering toxic masculinity of him like running in and announcing himself, and all the women going like, yeah, no, we're not about that. You just, you just know. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work, but parts of it I want it to work. I'm like, because it's not the intention and it doesn't work with the ending, but part of me still wants to just read it as, yeah, no, this is about like, they're like, no, we have a good little society here and this works and we don't have any time for your bullshit. And
I was hoping like part of me was like, you know, if we had spent the first 15 minutes showing that there's potentially Nick Cage is a cop with a gray area who might have done something terrible, and the more like they could have fixed this movie just fixing, like, I don't need his breakdown. I don't really care if he picks up a doll from the street, like because it really, they worked really hard to show him as a hero, and I was just like, what if he was like a pedophile cop? Then everything that happens to him and everything would make sense. And then this cult is really exacting justice.
Yeah.
Right.
When they're really just wanting to fucking make honey and sell it.
I think
and be left alone.
I think you could recut what's there. Like cut off the beginning, start when he arrives at the island, and then cut to these shots of him interacting with the mother and daughter in the car, and just cut to it in a way that makes it seem really, really creepy. Never actually saying that he's whatever you want to interpret that as, but just really strongly implying it. And then I bet you that could work. It would still be a bad movie, but it would just work in a different way. I'm tempted to do that, but I don't have time.
I mean, I did enjoy the ending, and I do enjoy the little, you know, button on the end where they're gonna like kill James Franco. I was like, that's great. I want to see them burn up James Franco too, you know. Like,
time for a sequel. Burn James Franco.
It could work as almost like a kind of like dumbed down, less nuanced version of the end of Midsommar, which is a film ending that I really like, because which we could talk about, but we're not talking about that film today. We're talking about a much shittier film. But it could have at least the cathartic release element that you get in Midsommar without some of the like, wait, but let's think about it, because Midsommar actually cared about its cult and what its cult was about in a way that the Wicker Man remake does not. They're just like, it's a matriarchy. That's all you really need to know, you know?
I feel like Midsommar looked at this version of Wicker Man and was like, oh, he fucked it up. Here's how to do it better, because he brought back elements of the bear suit.
The bear suit was ridiculous, though. I mean, well, just the image of Nick Cage running around in a bear suit in that sunny
running
weather.
Up to the daughter.
But at a certain point, like when he's carrying her through the woods, and he like takes the head of the bear suit off, but he's still like running around in bare feet, like the bare feet, not bare feet, and like, it just is so ridiculous. So here's the thing that really annoyed me about the third act, when everything kind of falls apart for Cage, is that, you know, these kind of like mystery thrillers hinge upon the big reveal at the very end, where you're like, where everything is supposed to come together. But the problem is, like, I feel like Neil LaBute just loses all those strings way too early in the plot, where you're already predicting what's going to happen before the second act is over. Like, I'm looking back at my notes, and as soon as it's clear that all the women on the island are malevolent and that the men are slaves, I wrote down, is Ed the sacrifice? Underline. And that's exactly what turned out to be the case. And I was like, oh, this sucks.
Not even in a fun way either.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I really want that bird outfit that she had on.
Molly Parker.
Parker's bird outfit was great.
It was beautiful. Yeah, but
nice callback to the Raven in the desk. You know, I was like, cool. It looks so cool. And
it kind of reminded me of The Village, because Shyamalan's film.
I didn't watch that.
It was also I don't want to toot my own horn, but I remember watching that film in the theater. Yes, I paid to see that, and I didn't know I knew nothing about the plot other than the fact that like some of the critics did not like the big reveal at the end. That's all I knew going into it. And I remember just sitting there thinking, I'm like, what could the critics not have liked about this movie? And then before the house lights came on, I was like, could it be that? And then the house lights came on. And then as soon as like 5 minutes had elapsed in the film, I was like, that's exactly where this is going to go. And I feel like the same thing happened here because like LaBute does not keep the information we're supposed to not know tight enough to the chest until it's all falls apart.
He also just thinks he's smarter than everyone. You can tell by the way that he's lazy about all of those things. And I think with Midsommar, Ari Aster. Ari Aster was like, well, fuck it. I'm going to do this better. I'm going to have the bear. I'm going to have the burning dude. I'm going to have the society. I'm going to have them dressed like Mormons. I'm going to have them do some weird shit with some stuff.
I'm going to have the women be characters with motivations.
Right. And like, I'm going to cast some really cool people and
with diversity.
Yeah. Right. And like some suspicion, like what? And this is how it's going to go. And literally I was just like, oh. Like it's just fuck you to Neil LaBute.
I mean, look, I'd seen the original, so I knew where it was going. But even if I hadn't, I would have 1,000,000% known where it was going. It's telegraphed very, very quickly, and it really feels like Neil LaBute just has such a low opinion of his audience that that's going to work. And then there was also, if I'm recalling correctly, times where he didn't reveal information, but for no clear purpose, that's not generating suspense to just like withhold from the audience the fact that like his ex's, if I'm recalling correctly, his ex's daughter is his daughter, but they don't make that clear originally, but not for any good reason, just kind of to be like, oh, look, here's a new piece of information, but nobody figured it out. It was artificially withheld from us.
Yeah.
Halfway, like that reveal was halfway through the film. And I was like,
what the fuck was that?
And I wrote down, and I wrote down, because I was writing in my notes all these theories about who the father was. And then when Willow finally reveals that Ed is the father, I wrote, you are the father, Marpovich. And I was just like, I'm like, why?
Like, that's not how you make a film. That's not how you generate suspense. That's not how you give like payoffs. That's not any of these things. And it makes me feel insulted as a viewer.
It's idea masturbation, and we're just supposed to like buy it, essentially. Also, she was cast. So here's the other thing that was weird. So he was like the woman they cast was a decent actor, however, looked like his daughter. Like she was young enough to literally looked young enough to be his daughter. And then to have her kid also be like 7 or 8 or 10 or something. And so what about her and this relationship is so sustaining to him where he's like, oh my God, 10 years after she leaves me with my ring, am I going to go and chase after her? Like, there's literally nothing drawing him to her except for the fact that like she might be smoking hot, maybe.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But like if you actually do any of the math of logic, where you're like, okay, so she looks like she's 28, and he's clearly like 59, and then we, minus 8 years ago when they were together, and then she left. I was like, she would have been like a child. Like, what is happening here?
Maybe she was.
Maybe she was. I don't know. Just make it sinister than Neil LaBute, because like clearly you don't realize it actually is.
Yup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he dated her when she was like a teenager.
That would make everything make more sense.
Yeah.
It also kind of relates to a core question that I asked myself upon seeing these two films. And what they have in common in terms of cults and secret societies, which is how do U.S. specifically cults and secret societies in each film relate to both the country where it's set and the government, and how do they relate to gender? So, for example, I would say National Treasure is arguably a patriarchal nationalist fantasy, and Wicker Man is arguably a patriarchal nationalist nightmare. Discuss.
Yeah.
Agree.
Totally.
Okay.
Agreed.
Agree.
I mean, I think they're interesting they're not, but let's just say for the sake of we're doing a podcast that they are. I think that there's something that is an interesting point in that they're kind of doing the same thing. And they kind of come from the same perspective of that, like the dudes and their whole like thing and their structure of building the government, and it like Cage is a cop in Wicker Man, and he's part of that whole cult. And in National Treasure, it's a cult of knights that are traditionally viewed as the Knights Templar are traditionally viewed as male. I have no idea if there's anything about female knights involved with that at all, but in pop culture, it's pretty much universally depicted as male, and definitely like fixated on the founding fathers in that super creepy way that just America. And
also the Freemasons too. Freemasons are traditionally all men.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I remember I first heard about the Freemasons back in the 90s because I think technically somebody I knew in school was boasting about the fact that their families were Freemasons, and I didn't know what that meant. And so I asked my mom about it, and like my mom was an immigrant, but she had heard about the Freemasons. I'm like, really? You know? So I kind of had a very middling idea of what the Freemasons were as a kid.
Mm-hmm. My understanding of it is it's just a club that happened to involve people who had money, and then it gets involved in a lot of conspiracy theories because it's a very secretive club, but it is definitely like family passed down. There's a what do they call it? A hall not very far from my place. And
like a Masonic hall?
Yeah. It looks nice architecture. I don't know much about it. I've occasionally met people who are Masons who have like the ring and stuff, and they're like, yeah, this is a thing. They're not allowed to talk about it, and I'm like, I don't care. Like,
really, they're not allowed to talk about it?
Yeah, it's like they're not allowed to talk about specifics. You're supposed to be you're just supposed to be in it. The vague things that I've heard though is it's like a social club for dudes. It's probably more than that, but it's also just
it's not as interesting as the conspiracy theorists want it to be. I think. I don't know. I don't care that much.
Right. I mean, from what I've heard, it's like, the darkest or the wildest myths around the Freemasons is just that it has to do with the occult, and they've got rituals of their own and blah, blah, blah. And it's like a Faustian kind of idea, right? Like they've sold their souls to the devil in exchange for all this power and money and the legacy of such in this country.
And I think it has some not explicit like church connections, but it's not like in opposition to any specific churches or churches in general. And like it has flexibility there. And so it's been allowed to sort of exist the way it exists because powerful people have been involved with it, and it is not in contradiction, generally speaking, to people going to church. Because if it was, it would probably not do very well in this country.
It's interesting because I feel like usually when the Freemasons pop up in pop culture, it is kind of in a conspiracy theory way that's about like, look at these occult rituals and whatever things. But in National Treasure, it's just like, our forefathers were so awesome. Yeah. Look at all their awesome secret shit that makes no sense that I, as a white man in America today, can like harness and be heroic through. It's very, I mean, are there any people of color in National Treasure at all? They're both super white movies, as I recall.
I wrote down every
There's the little boy. There's the little boy.
There's a little boy.
Oh, the kid who helps him find the anagram in the first letter of every sentence.
He leads them to the Liberty Bell. There's also the black lady behind the counter who helps out Diane Kruger when she's trying to get away from one of the henchmen.
And
then also
the
lady
Declaration
at the
of Independence.
Yeah, the gift.
Oh, and there's
gift
also
shop.
Yes. Oh, yes. The gift shop lady. And then there's also the security guard at the gala who's like, oh, code red. We have a problem here. The Declaration is
It's got lots of black people in service jobs.
I guess it might be unfair to call any of the roles in National Treasure characters. I was going to say so, but there are no characters of color, but perhaps there are no characters really at all.
No.
Just tagging that to be fair. But it was a very white version of the world. It's not just the country. They go all the fuck over the place. In that movie. And it was very, like, Wicker Man, at least, you're like, okay, I get it. This is about this, like, cult of white people on an island off of...
the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, like, that at least there was a reason for it, although it was still, you know, strikingly white. There could have been, before he left, maybe more people of color, maybe.
Right.
Apparently
and
not.
To your point, no. Well, and to your point, Nicole, about this being a cult of white people, I wrote down in my notes as well, when it became clear how they were able to, you know, sustain themselves and keep the population growing, or at least the same. I wrote down House of the Fall of Usher because, you know, House of Usher is also a metaphor for white inbreeding and the idea of racial purity and the way that all kind of caves in on itself. So, yeah, similarly, it's kind of like a night. But I don't think, obviously, LaBute intends it to be a nightmare of, like, racial purity, but it kind of is, nevertheless.
Yeah, it's just there. I mean, another way Midsommar is a better movie, because that's like, that's a theme in that movie. That's part of what it's about. Whereas this, I think, like, Neil LaBute just didn't think about it because he's a white dude who's super white-centric and was more, like, zeroed in on this white version of a gender thing he was trying to do, whatever the fuck. Like, he says about it, he's like, it's not, you know, anti-feminist. It's not about, like, you know, women are bad. It's not about how men are bad. It's about women and men's fears about each other. And I'm like, so it's about your anxieties, Neil LaBute. You're another white dude creator universalizing your own fucking issues and being like, this is a universal story about how I'm an asshole.
I mean,
Cool
if you really think about it too, for National Treasure, who would have built all those secret tunnels if you know what I mean? It would have been, I'm sorry, it would have been slaves.
Yes.
Yeah, it absolutely would have
been. The founding fathers did that. They totally did
that.
They totally dug it with their,
all that physical labor.
Yeah, they're just famous for that, right? They're built
really
this
famous
country. Oh wait, no.
Yes,
no, they
that's
didn't.
what I was thinking. Is like, in terms of the whiteness of National Treasure, I guess it's kind of a necessity because otherwise there'd be a lot of questions raised that might undermine its fantastical premise about, like, the slave labor, for example, needed to make all this really cool stuff that is what Benjamin Franklin Harris, whatever his fucking name is. Gates.
Benjamin Franklin Gates. Because, he's like literally a gatekeeper because the whole family's job is to protect the secret of said treasure.
And that's
like,
awesome.
It's a
nice.
Yay. So it's like a whole, like, both movies are very much like Proud Boy viewing pleasure, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's... I'm so glad I was inebriated. My brain is thanking me right now. Maybe the big theory that overarches them both is, like, Nick Cage is being used as a tool for, like, white supremacist messaging, whether or not he knows. I don't think he knows. I think he just wants to make money. And I don't even think John Turtletaub gives a shit. I think he also just wants to make money. And I don't even think, like, Neil LaBute gives a shit because he's just really stoked about his ideas that all the bad people are ladies. But at the same time, it just, like, weaves into this terrible tapestry of, like, mediocre white men and, like, what white supremacy looks like, and how there's a theory that, like, a couple people who have brought up how Netflix has trained us to accept mediocre content because they just keep throwing it at us. And I kind of feel like this is a larger scale version of that. This is how the movie industry does it.
I think,
you know?
I think that's a funny observation because it suggests that it's Netflix that did it and not all of Hollywood that's been doing it for decades.
Yeah, they just give it to us in a platform.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, we've been trained to accept mediocre shit. And I think that's really fascinating.
And they keep giving us like most movies are at best like okay. and which is
Yeah.
makes sense. Most of any
But I'll
kind of
take
art
okay.
is just okay, and
I'll take okay as in Wonder Woman okay. Like Wonder Woman, the first one, was like a solid B. Like, I'm not going to watch it again. I don't think Gal Gadot is a very good actress. I think that movie was like not great, but it was fun to watch. And like, you know, it's not the most feminist thing. And I really like Patty Jenkins and I'm rooting for her, but I'm not really raring to watch 1984. I'm gonna say that right now. I'd rather take okay, even Wonder Woman 1984 than okay, National Treasure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
I would not have watched National Treasure if I wasn't watching it for this show.
I never would have watched National Treasure if not for this. Ever. I don't think.
Like,
I
I
watch
just
a lot
now-
of trash.
I mean, I watched
I do.
Trash too. I watched Silent Night.
Janet's
Deadly
gotten
Night
like
last
multiple
night.
texts from me about Beastmaster.
I was
Oh,
like, "This is
Beastmaster.
so oily, Chuck."
It's how else are they supposed to protect themselves from swords? Come on, the sword just slides off. It slides off. No, you guys were
reading
totally
about
right
it
about
as well.
Beastmaster, and I worry about watching it again. But at the same time, I'm totally gonna watch it again because I know how
felt bad
stupid it is.
I know. I felt bad because, well, I mean, I watched it a bunch when I was a kid. I mean, it was available, so it was just there. But I felt bad because one of my good buddies from film school also, this was like one of his favorite childhood memories or of film watching as a kid in the 80s. And I was like, am I going to ruin this for him? Oh, well.
There's like a thing, there's like a line with some movies where like I kind of always knew it was bad, so I'm okay with still, like if I go back and watch it, I'm like, no, I know that this has problems. And then there's some movies which I can't think of an example right now, but it comes up every once in a while where I'm like, I'm not going to go back and watch that because I want to keep it as that memory of me enjoying it. One example being, actually that just came to mind, is the 2004 Dawn of the Dead, because I hate Zack Snyder, like passionately despise his movies. And I really enjoyed that at the time. And I want to leave that in a little pod of like, I enjoyed that movie. Because if I watch it again, I'll see all his garbage in it.
I've done that as well.
But in terms of National Treasure and Wicker Man, one of the rage texts that I sent Janet last night, I can read it back to you. It's in all caps. Of all the films we could have done for CageFest 2.0, why these two?
It's true. I think that's my fault because I was like, oh, they're both about cults.
I will say
that's a
Janet
topic.
agreed to this. We did have a chat. We like the three of us chatted at some point. We're kind of like, oh yeah, sure, these two. Because I
Makes sense.
I wanted to see the Wicker Man remake because I thought it would be
Same.
more entertaining than it was. And National Treasure, I was just like, yeah, that's like one of the biggest Nick Cage hits. So sure, but
It seemed innocuous enough on per paper at the surface, right?
Right. I mean, and I was just genuinely like, the Nick Cage movies, I wanted to watch Wicker Man because I hadn't watched Wicker Man. I'd already watched National Treasure, and I was like, okay, that's some trash. We can have some fun with that. And then I was like, cults.
that was, yeah, because I remember I was
That's
kind of into, I wanted to do Vampire's Kiss, which is better than either of these movies by a lot. By a lot, and also just crazier.
The Cult of Cage.
Yeah.
And then the Cult of Cage propping up the cult of white supremacy and the cult of white mediocrity and white supremacy through movies.
Yeah.
That is the theme of today.
Yeah. Which is kind of ends up, it's kind of media's default. So it's hard to even say that anybody involved in the movie was directly trying to do that, so much as they just they're already cult members of it. And so they're just perpetuating the cult without really realizing.
National Treasure is not, agreed. National Treasure is not overtly misogynistic, but it definitely has that. It's implicit as well.
I felt
not
the way that they treat what's her name, Diane
Dr.
Kruger's
Chase.
character. Yeah,
Dr. Chase.
it's like she's clearly the most competent person, but not being treated as. The
But
most
she's just an
competent person.
adornment on the entire.
Yeah.
Like, she's just there to look pretty and to be a foil for Cage to bounce the crazy off of.
Yeah, and to fall in
Here's a-
love with him for some reason.
I definitely had a note somewhere about how something with her character was kind of like weirdly retro sexist, where there was like some kidnapping thing with her, and it was just
Right.
like, it felt very, it felt like not overtly aggressively, you know, like rubbing your face in it, but just from it felt like retro sexist to me. And
There's a weird moment. There's a weird moment when they're all underground and they're all in line and they pass him, and then she's the last one he grabs her. He's like, "Come here," and then he kisses her, and I was like, "Wait, am I so drunk that I missed the build up to this?" Because I know that he gave her the button and whatever, but and there's like looks. There are
looks,
but
it's supposed to be sexual tension.
I was just like, how do you have time for this? Like,
I mean, I guess because he figures it may be their last shot. They're disappearing underground. They may never come back up.
I guess
Sean Bean may kill them down there. Who knows? The status quo is going to change soon. So says John Voight.
The John Voight thing. The status quo. You gotta keep the status quo.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're gonna kill you. I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
That's a very specific thing to say, John Voight.
I can't make sense of my notes here.
Maintaining the status quo, otherwise you'll die. That's not really
what,
terrifying.
Though?
What?
A status quo of what?
Well, because John Voight kept saying, like, you know, right now the status quo is we are all alive. You have information they need.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as that status quo changes, they gonna kill us. You know.
So why, John Voight, are you keeping a random hairdryer with lemons, a convenient bowl of lemons next to it in your house, John?
Because he's an old guy.
Is that a thing old guys have?
I have it in a list on Amazon waiting for me to order those once I get old enough. Like,
hairdryer and lemons.
I'm a white guy who's getting close to being old. And so, you know, once I hit 45, I get to have those. Like, I'm not even actually allowed to order them until I'm 45. But once I do.
Not on the same grocery list.
Once I do, they're going to be right here. I'm going to have that hairdryer and those lemons. What am I going to do with them? I don't know, but I'll have them in case I need them.
The amount of abuse that document endures throughout the film, not just the jostling and the chaos, but like also, the lemons and the hairdryer, but like when they're in Independence Hall after looking at the Liberty Bell, they just unfurl it out in the open in this room in a public space. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's not like oxygen is known to damage old documents.
No.
It's not like there's a reason that they're sealed.
It is interesting to me how, like, National Treasure, they get to just run around doing all that, right? Just like throwing the Declaration of Independence around while being heroes somehow in this almost all white male environ where there's like just the pretty blonde lady to be the like supposedly
also German.
Yeah, she's weirdly.
So she's like, I'm American, but I wasn't born here, yet she's German. So because she can't hide her accent.
European immigrants make America great. You know, it felt
she gets to say that.
Yeah.
She gets to say that.
But yeah, like she's there. She's the token. She's the love interest for no reason, even though they have no chemistry, whatever. It's this white male like fantasy playground land. And then Wicker Man is about like a white lady fantasy playground land, except that that's an evil cult. And they're the bad guys to even get to create that space where men are on the margins, whereas in National Treasure, like women are completely on the margins. People of color are virtually non-existent except in these like servant roles, basically. But that's just normal. Like they didn't have to go make a cult for that because their cult is, you know, U.S. like white nationalist patriarchy, basically. And yeah, I guess I learned a lot from looking at these two films.
Do you feel enriched as a human being and as an American?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
I feel like I'm just going to be a better American now. And
I will say my appreciation for the breadth of insanity that Cage's career encompasses has been deepened. Like, just from the two films we talked about in CageFest 1.0
oh man,
to the two more that I mean, it's just how does one person do all of these things?
Cocaine,
Nick
money.
Cage.
Yeah,
cocaine,
family connection.
It's because he's Nick Cage and cocaine.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just, you know, that said, I did feel like I didn't get the full Cage in either of these films. Like,
no.
He does have that puppy dog enthusiasm that made National Treasure cohere, but he was relatively restrained, and Wicker Man is like not as batshit as people talk like it is. Maybe the director's cut, more of the crazy comes out, but he mostly, I'm just like, yeah, this is just, you're an asshole and this is not good acting, but it's not like over the top. He's just like, he is in a different movie than everybody else. There is that classic Cage component, but it's not.
It's a crazy movie for people who don't watch crazy movies.
Yeah. I think the thing that's craziest in Wicker Man is just the hoops that LaBute makes him jump through, right? Like being submerged in a sewer for an entire night where he almost succumbs to hypothermia, and then kicking down the door of every single house in this community, and then running around in a bear suit, and then riding on a bicycle like Miss Gulch from The Wizard of Oz. And then there's a lot of physical stuff that he does in this film.
It's more like why? It's less like, oh, that's crazy and weird and fun, and more just like, why are you even at this island? Why didn't you just go?
Why didn't you talk to your precinct or whatever and be like, hey, my daughter's missing on this crazy cult island? Like, we didn't get a scene, did we, of them being like, we can't deal with them because we have an arrangement. Like, you could have answered that question. Like, you get that they're secretive. You get that law enforcement is largely just like, we don't want to have anything to do. They do their thing. We don't hear anything. We got no problems. But you would think he wouldn't just go make his own private arrangement with the pilot who flies in groceries or whatever. Which also didn't make sense, because I was like, he's not paying that pilot enough to lose like this steady, easy gig.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the pilot's a guy and he knows big group of ladies. That's dangerous. So he has an opportunity to stop that with another guy.
But he doesn't care about that either.
No, I know. I'm just
I know. It's just how much like Neil LaBute didn't seem to think about his own material, or think about like why anyone is behaving the way they are, other than like, okay, the plot's going to go like this. So everybody just fall in line with the plot. Like it's
my idea.
I think one thing that I can't remember when at one point when we were texting about the movies the last couple days, but both of the movies definitely national treasure, but also to an extent, The Wicker Man are just, that's what all those movies were at that time. Like any movie with a budget was like plot point, plot point, plot point, plot point, plot point, plot point. But it was just plot point. It was just plot. There was no character. There's no time to develop any of it. And it's just this, I mean, Nicole, you and I have talked about this a few times. There's that kind of dead zone post 9/11 up until 2009, years, 2010. Like the Bush years is just like, yes, there are good movies then, but even the good movies, or the movies that people will say are good from that time, are also just not.
It was a bad time for pop culture, in my opinion. Like an extremely
We were all
bad
pissed
time.
about W.
Yeah, and the writing was just...
Also, people were scared of W. Like, the thing is, like, people look back now and are like, oh, people hated him. But it took a long time for, like, the tide to turn. And before that, like, people were scared. Artists were scared. Musicians were scared. Nobody wanted to directly address what was going on in a critical way, in part because there was, like, weird governmental overreach going on at the time then.
Yeah.
And people were fucking cowards about it, frankly. And
well, the government had 9/11 as an excuse for whatever they wanted to do, and they used it. And you know, more so than arguably in some ways more so than anything that's happened in the last 4 years, that produces a kind of fear in people where like they were like there was, everybody was agreeing to it. Nobody would disagree with anything, because you could just whip out 9/11 and then and you can still do that, which is
to an extent. Not perhaps not quite as I mean, now it's different. Now there are all kinds of other things to weaponize in terms of fear and paranoia, but it's still like take you back to the mid-aughts. Like 2004 and 5 is like when everyone in the country, not just on the East Coast, was obsessed with like Sex and the City, because that was still on air.
Yeah.
You know, like that was like the big cultural zeitgeist. So
it was a good way to escape, and like the whole idea that ladies have sex and enjoy it too. Oh my gosh.
What?
Ooh, maybe
And it was the rise of reality television, because it's like, oh, we can do these for cheap. It was like the simple life, and lifestyles of the rich and famous came back. The kind of like 90s mainstream cultural push against some of the like, you know, excesses of the yuppie 80s or whatever, where that wasn't what was cool anymore. And like really there was a massive backlash to that seemed to be connected with like this nationalism post 9/11, where it was like rich people are our saviors again. Now it's time for everybody to just like, you know, hope that someday they'll be the person on MTV Cribs or whatever. There was all this like wealth masturbation like stuff.
and that was right before the big like financial meltdown in 2008.
Yep.
Because things started to unravel in the markets around 2007. Because I remember I had a day job in finance back then, and in 2008 and 9, that's when everything kind of really fell apart. But before then, everyone was kind of like flush with cash. No one was really worrying about the markets. There was a tipping point at the end of that decade, because then the markets crashed, and then there was Occupy Wall Street and all that.
now
So
we're
according
here.
to Neil LaBute, through Wicker Man, the fall of everything and the core of everything bad is because of ladies getting together and hanging out and making honey.
There you go. If you got a bunch of ladies on an island making honey, then all the markets are going to crash.
They're all going to crash.
Everything's going to hell. That's what it is.
They're only going to use men for sex and procreation.
Yep. And
that's
not
it.
let them talk. How terrible.
I can't possibly imagine a worse world than that.
And then National Treasure's stance on that would be that, you know, everything went to hell because people just don't know how to solve the riddles of the founding fathers well enough.
Yeah.
Because
if you are just more patriotic and just
have
enough gumption.
Line. There's weird,
there's that. No one is crazy enough to believe in the conspiracy to begin with.
Yep.
Only Gates can do it.
Yep.
Right?
Even
And
his
if you
dad was like,
defeat
this is stupid.
And if you defeat the British man who's trying to steal your Declaration of Independence,
I was rooting for Sean Bean for chunks of it, though. Like yesterday, I was like, he's like the most charismatic character in this whole movie, and I kind of want him to get it. Like, I kind of want him to win. Yeah, he keeps threatening to kill people, but...
Sean Bean's really good at playing the villain.
Yeah.
I just wish they hadn't done that to his hair. I wonder if they did that to his hair to distract us from how bad Nick Cage's hair is.
Probably.
I think he still had that hair from like Lord of the Rings.
Oh, that's possible. This would have been between some of them, right? Or when? No, or does he die?
No, this was
in
right
one of
after.
them? Oh, okay.
This was right after, because all of the Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers and Return of the King all came out before 2005.
Okay, right. I haven't actually watched them since around then because I like to just shit on the Return of the King when I teach screenwriting, but that's another conversation.
It just felt like extra highlighty, you know? I don't know. It felt
it was very
It felt like a wig, and I didn't understand why he would do that. I was like, "You're an attractive man. I don't understand." Oh, right, because Nick Cage's hair and chest hair. That's just too much.
He's got to be able to compete. But they did go the other direction with the sequel, which I have watched the sequel, which I don't know if I'm going to say if it's better or worse, but it does have Ed Harris as the villain. So instead of competing with the hair, they're just like, none. No hair.
No
Ed
hair.
Harris.
I have to admit, as angry as I was throughout my viewing of National Treasure, I am morbidly curious to see how they could have made a sequel to it.
I mean, isn't there a third one that they're trying to make also?
They're trying to, because the second one still made a bunch of money too. And so just if you do choose to watch the second one, just a preview of how extra problematic it's going to get. There's a secret in Mount Rushmore.
Oh.
Yeah. That's the face. That's the face to make where you're just like,
okay.
No. So, but it is Ed Harris, and Ed Harris is, I don't know, he's solid. We just started watching the the 90s The Stand miniseries again because we were watching the new one and they only have 2 episodes out. And I'm like, let's watch the old one. We have it on VHS. So we put it in. He's in it. And in the first episode, and it's just like, there's Ed Harris. Ed Harris is always good. He's solid. Anyway, I'm sort of...
I disagree about the always portion. Because when he was in Snowpiercer, you could tell that a lot of the American actors didn't trust Bong Joon-ho. You could tell by the way that they were acting on camera, and Ed Harris was that person.
Okay,
like,
that makes
stuck
sense.
out the most to me. I was just like, oh.
Has anyone seen the new series version of Snowpiercer?
I've heard it's bad. I haven't watched it, but I've heard it's like the opposite of the movie. Like it.
That's too bad.
I don't know. Go ahead. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. I apologize.
Sorry. I think we've gone off on a tangent.
Sorry.
That's okay. I think that's the point of this episode, which is that there's no point in the 2 movies that we watched.
We'd much rather be talking about any Bong Joon-ho movie.
That's true.
Any Bong Joon-ho movie. I mean, off topic is a good way to think about the Nick Cage canon.
It's true.
Right? Because, like, somehow he was, like, doofy and, like, puppy dog adorable. And I remember being attracted to him in the mid-90s when I was, like, but a tween. So I just dated myself. And there's a specific moment in City of Angels where I was like, oh, my God, he's so dreamy and, like, not conventional, not Devon Sawa. Like, it's like, This is so great for my, like, angsty self. And then, like, that lasted for, like, a super short period of time. For like a year. And then all the crazy stuff started coming out, which was still fun. But I was like, I'm no longer attracted to this man. And then and then it just went pew, like right after the Summer of Cage. Like suddenly all this stuff started coming out and you're just like, what's happening? Mm-hmm. Like it's Keanu Reeves without the self-awareness and having a greater family pedigree to just shunt you in. And he could have totally done so many cool, interesting, fun things. And like he's getting better at like being self-aware now, like I would say in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
But this is that weird time in the mid-aughts where you were just like, if I was a betting person, I wouldn't bet on you, like because I have no idea what you're gonna do next. I really don't.
I mean, he was still
also
getting,
why?
Yeah, he was still getting no. I apologize. I interrupted you. He was still getting a little bit of like, oh, it's a Nick Cage movie through like the early 2000s. Like people would still show up to the theater for that. I think it's stuff like this is what ultimately like put it so it's like, oh, it's a Nick Cage movie. Okay. Well, I mean, he's still doing tons of stuff.
He is. He's slated to be He's going to play Joe Exotic in the untitled Joe Exotic project.
Yay.
He's too tall.
Oh, well.
He's like 6'3".
I feel so tired just remembering that project exists.
So here's a question that I have. So speaking of cults and then Nick Cage making a lot of movie and Nick Cage making a lot of movie for National Treasure, is there like a cult of Cage? Because all these movies, he does hit it out of the park at some points. Right? Mm-hmm. Like he's gotten smart in the later years where like when he voiced Spider-Man, when he was a voice of, Into the Spider-Verse, which I thought was brilliant casting. He did really, really well. He was great in Kick-Ass. He's starting to understand like his role in films. Like even in Mandy, I wouldn't have watched it. Like I didn't particularly think Mandy was like great or bad. It's not my thing necessarily, but I thought it was good to have him in that movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he did well to be in that movie. And so the cult, I'm just curious about if there's a cult of Cage and how that's changed through the years,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about cult, but there's definitely a fandom, like a devoted fandom to him. And I know a subset of movie nerds who love Cage.
Mm-hmm.
Like unironically love Cage?
No. And like they appreciate the full breadth of Cage, if you will, like warts and all, right? Like pardon the expression, but like fully acknowledging that there's been an evolution, not just in his characters and the types of roles that he takes, but in like his own self-awareness over time, right? Like you just sort of have to consider him in his entirety.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends who talk about Cage and write about him not in a sort of like a worshiping idyllic way, but in a Cage is crazy for all these reasons, but we still love him because, right?
He's their chosen thesis topic of study.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he's an interesting conversation topic. And, for some people, they really enjoy sort of picking apart and analyzing all the inconsistencies and through lines of his career.
I think because of that kind of, we could call it a cult of Cage. We don't have to, but we could. There is this thing that happens as well that, Janet, I feel like I remember talking with you about this around the time Mandy came out, where there were people, like I saw that at the Alamo, and there were people who were there, and just from the word go, they were just primed for Nick Cage craziness. And he doesn't unleash until later into that film. He gets completely unhinged as the insane plot of that film does its thing. But at the beginning, there were people who were just laughing too much. Just anytime he appeared, they would laugh. It's that thing of they were there for that crazy Nick Cage experience. They knew they were going to get it, and they were making it happen before it even started. That I find obnoxious. I'm he's not.
Yeah.
Let me watch the fucking movie. He's not there yet. We're not there yet.
It's that misuse of so bad it's good, and ironically watching films and films being made to be cult films, or films being declared as cult films as soon as they come out, as opposed to people actually liking them, and over time an appreciation for an underappreciated film is developed. It became a thing in I think the late 90s. It started becoming a thing. Oh yeah, no, I love this film's so bad it's good. I'm or it's just bad.
Do you know what that means?
Yeah, exactly. It's that I don't think that word means what you think that word means. Because I've had that discussion with friends over the years. Oh, so it's so bad it's good. I'm no, it's really bad and I enjoy it.
Yeah.
It is not so bad that it loops around to being good. Yeah, that's a thing that can happen because it's kind of an accidental enjoyment, but that is a rarity, not a no, you just made a shitty movie.
Is National Treasure so bad it's good?
No.
I think it's just bad.
It's just bad.
But I think there are clearly people out there who really enjoy it, or else it wouldn't have made so much money.
Yeah, and
I will 100% go with the three of you when in the after times and watch a midnight screening like The Room, where everyone's yelling at it and we all dress up as Arkansas Smith and have bottles and bottles of wine and have a bridge drinking game so I don't have to get carried out the theater drunk. I'll do that.
I would rather do that for The Wicker Man, though, because The Wicker Man's shorter.
I would do that for The Wicker Man.
The Wicker Man's shorter.
Yeah.
I think The Wicker Man's a little bit more appropriate for it, too, because, National Treasure's not that kind. It's bad, but it's blockbuster bad. Especially, it's just this is built. It's actually, I would argue that the kind of bad the two movies are is National Treasure is bad, but it's doing exactly what it's meant to do. It's doing exactly what they intended to do. There are no mistakes to it. It's just bad. While I think that The Wicker Man is bad in terms of incompetence. It's not doing what they intended it to do. It's almost doing the opposite, but it can't even manage to do the opposite.
But with a film like National Treasure, I feel like its main goal is just to earn money.
Yes.
It's a studio film. It's meant to sell tickets.
It's a ride. It's to Martin Scorsese's controversial point that I didn't really have a problem with, much as I like a lot of Marvel movies, of their rides,
Yeah.
Their experiences. You go and there's the sound and there's the score and there's Nick Cage and you're just getting kind of jerked around by the plot. You're almost not watching it so much as being entertained, having entertainment coming at you.
That's what it's for. Just like The Irishman is an advertisement for Netflix.
Yeah.
The Irishman is an advertisement for Netflix. Marvel.
That's 10 hours long.
It's 10 hours long and it doesn't need 9.5 of them.
You can't even start talking about Tarantino and how his films similarly are.
Yeah. Also, it's a ride. It's just a ride. It's fine. That's what it is.
I like rides.
Yeah. That's what a lot of movies are. That's all they're supposed to be. Now, do as many of them and does as much money need to be spent on them as is? That's a different question. I don't think so, but...
So, yeah, I feel like these are, in terms of the Cage canon, I'm interested in the Wicker Man because it's a weird one. And like what...
That is a weird one.
Yeah, and it's what doesn't work about it is very relevant to my interests. So I wouldn't say I like it, but I might watch it again someday. If I could watch the director's cut, at least, I would watch that once I've forgotten how boring long stretches of it are. But like National Treasure is just too long. It's just too long for me. If they'd cut out a big section in the middle and it just went from the batshit beginning to the batshit end,
yes,
without as much like treasuring or whatever in the middle, I might be on board, because I do have a note that says this picks up at the end, because I was just like, great, they're under Manhattan and apparently like into the Hudson River and into like there's just these like underground caverns of treasure. I'm like, great. This makes
miles and miles.
And they light a bunch of it on fire.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's not going to cause any problems at all.
Pillars of support beams of wood.
Right?
Nope.
Rotting wood.
Rotting old, hundreds of year old wood. Nope. There's a point in National Treasure where I was like, because of my 5 drinking game rules, I was like, okay, I'd be relieved when they had certain aspects happen. Like if they were having normal conversation, I was like, oh, sweet, they're not going to say declaration 15 times, or like they're doing the research montage in the Library of Congress. But then I realized I had screwed myself, because like when there's lots of action, that meant that he would probably shout, and that means I would have to drink. And that means like Sean Bean would be in 5 cuts. But then when they'd have long stretches of talking, they'd say declaration or Thomas Edison 15 times, and I would also have to drink. And so it was like you don't really even know what you would get a break from.
I think you can only choose one rule to play that particular movie.
I think so.
One rule at a time.
Is it the Cageisms, or is it the National Treasure-isms?
Or if you have a group, everybody plays a different rule.
Yeah.
So everybody's on a different thing, and whoever can whoever can last through their rule the longest probably needs
before
rehab.
tapping out.
So Nick Cage, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Let's take a brief break for another ad, and we'll come back. We'll just wrap it up.
Sean, we need to tell people about our Patreon.
I don't feel like it.
Why not? Why would we make one if we didn't want people to see it?
I just think they'll be overwhelmed.
Well, there is a lot of content on our Patreon.
Nicole? A lot of content? We have behind-the-scenes materials, early access to our short films, music videos, and podcasts, updates on current and future projects, video production and social media management training materials, a serialized sci-fi novel, personal writings, access to our award-winning films, small talk and meme, and other exclusive subscriber content. That's not even to mention all the other ideas we have.
Okay, maybe it is a lot.
And it all starts at just $2 a month. How much can people really handle at just $2 per month? And we update weekly. Weekly, Nicole.
Yeah, maybe it's too much to talk about now.
If they really feel motivated, I think it would be great for them to check out patreon.com/4milescircus and subscribe. There's even public posts available so they can get a taste for what we offer. But again, how much can people handle for as little as $2 a month?
I guess they'll just have to decide for themselves by going to patreon.com/4milescircus.
Yes, patreon.com/4, the word mile as in the distance, and circus as in where all the clowns are. All one word, no dashes or underscores.
There is just so much to be seen at patreon.com/4milescircus.
I'm so overwhelmed thinking about it, I'm going to cry. Incredible. Incredible. And we're back. And Nicole, for wrap up, do we have any questions for our listeners? I feel like we don't. I feel like we just need to tell them to watch the movies because we shouldn't be the only ones who watch those movies.
I mean, I would say we can ask them, how do you feel these films fit into the Nicolas Cage canon? I think
What are your drinking games? What are their drinking game rules?
Excellent question, Janet.
Play Janet's drinking game.
What is your capacity for masochism?
Another good one.
I don't know that I necessarily want to ask that question.
We can also.
I'm afraid of answers.
What does our audience think these films say about like race and gender and nationalism and secret societies and or cults? Maybe they have a different take than our correct takes. I don't know.
Do you have a sincere and earnest belief in any conspiracy theories about secret societies yourself?
I don't want to hear about
what
that.
Are they? Okay, never mind.
You know what? Sure. Just, you know what? I want to know who we know has those earnest beliefs so I don't know them anymore.
That's true. Tell us
Show
who to
yourselves.
unfollow on the social medias.
Because I will. I have and I will. So yeah, I think some good feedback on that. I would be interested to hear what people have to say, what they think about the nature of cults and secret societies and how these two films both address that. If they dare to watch them, or if they love these films and want to say that we're wrong about our assessment of them.
Tell
Feel
us
free.
why. Hey,
Exactly.
the Wicker
Make the
Man
case.
won Best Cinematography at like the United
Where?
Associations of Canadian Cinematographers. It won a Canadian Cinematography Award, which
Note to self: don't hire Canadian cinematographers. Then
I feel like this isn't fair. I feel like there was some tomfoolery because I was quite shocked.
That sounds like an organization someone would make up.
do you guys want to tell the people again about your show, the Guilt Free Features? Want to pitch them on Guilt Free Features?
Yeah, why not? So Janet and I, this is Karen speaking, we have a lovely podcast that we call our own. It's Guilt Free Features. The whole idea of it is that we take a look back and do some deep cuts on films that people consider to be their guilty pleasures. And, coming from the generation that we do, sort of like XY-ish, we end up throwing it back to a lot of films from like the 80s and 90s and early aughts. And Janet, what else do you want to say about it?
Just looking at guilty pleasure movies and guilty pleasure content in general and thinking about why you should feel bad or shouldn't feel bad for loving them the way you do. And it's okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right, because cultural sensibilities and whatnot have changed over time, and how does that affect our readings of these films today?
And I regularly listen and am reminded that I'm a bad person.
Thanks, Sean. Job done.
Job done.
Goal achieved.
It's a show that's just about, Sean, your tastes are really bad.
It's a fine podcast. I think our listeners would also be interested in. If you have not checked it out yet, you can check it out. You can always check out the episode Sean and I were on, CageFest 1, where we talked about Face Man.
We're talking about Face Man.
Face Man.
Face Man and
Con Ed. My two favorite Nicolas Cage films.
Con Off.
Face Off and Con Air.
You could go listen to the four of us talk about those, and then you could also listen to their many other excellent episodes about a lot of my favorite guilty pleasure films of the past, like Cruel Intentions and Wild Things and all those films.
You guys just did Willow and Legend as well. I need to listen to that one because I love Willow.
Legend.
Yeah, that one just came out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just in
Legend,
time for Christmas.
Legend and Willow.
I love Willow. They're doing a series.
Yes.
That's exciting.
Starring Warwick Davis.
He's back.
Because he's like, I can't do the Leprechaun movies anymore.
Yeah, there's two new ones that he's not in. That's why I'm not watching them.
Yeah, why would I watch that?
Why was Warwick Davis the original Leprechaun?
Yes.
in
Yeah,
the
for
Leprechaun movie?
6
Yes.
movies?
Whoa!
6 movies, yeah.
And he is having so much fun. Like he is just like over the top, like
I just watched Sean, not this Sean, the Sean in the other room, and I just watched all 6 original Leprechaun movies.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
wow.
Yeah.
That's so many Leprechaun movies in a row.
I've only seen 5 of them, yeah.
I needed those Leprechaun movies. I really needed those Leprechaun movies.
But the thing that's great about them is, and I don't know about Back to the Hood because I haven't seen it, but at least the first 5, you do not need the context of the other films because they are not connected.
You really don't.
There is
for
no
any of
connection.
them.
Oh, even Back to the Hood?
Yeah, I mean, it's tangentially connected in the way that some of the other sequels, like, kind of are, but then, like, they don't have consistent rules, as you know from my Leprechaun spreadsheet, Sean. I did make a spreadsheet.
They're all
of
unique
like
films.
What the mythology is in each one, because it changes. I can share my spreadsheet. It has some holes in it. I need some help finishing it. So if you
I
would
actually
like
haven't looked at it yet.
If anybody would like to watch the Leprechaun films on
public
HBO
document.
and help me with my Leprechaun spreadsheet,
They should get back to you on that.
please do.
If you would like to help Nicole, just go ahead and reach out to us, 4 Mile Circus. We're at 4 Mile Circus on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Just message us. You can email us at info@4milecircus.com. Leave us messages. Tell us how terrible we are, whatever. You could even help her by leaving a review on not iTunes, on Apple Podcasts or wherever.
Or
Anywhere that they leave a review on Yelp. Like, create a page for our podcast on Yelp. Leave us a Yelp review. Whatever it is, that's going to help Nicole with her Leprechaun spreadsheet. So just feel free to contact us through any of those. Anchor.fm/the celluloid mirror. You can also leave us a voicemail. And you can just contact us. Let us know. Help Nicole out with Leprechaun. Or talk about the podcast. Whatever you want to do.
It's all the same thing.
It really is all the same thing. We probably are going to have to do the Leprechaun series on the show at some point.
Sure.
I don't know how.
Have fun with that.
We'll have you guys come. We'll bring everybody in to talk about a different Leprechaun movie. It'll be like our All Stars episode or something, where all of our guests return
does that mean we
to talk about a different Leprechaun movie. This is a terrible idea that we shouldn't do. So thank you guys for joining us this month. I guess we do a monthly show, so thank you for joining us this month
and suffering through these 2 lesser Cage canon classics.
It was our pleasure, perhaps not to watch the films, but definitely to talk about them with you guys.
I don't know. I enjoyed myself texting everyone and then afterwards looking back at it.
You gotta find the enjoyment. You gotta find the fun.
Unleashing
Make your
my
own
rage
fun.
through my texts to Janet about how I needed this movie to end. But
all of my responses to Karen were ha 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 ha.
She's just laughing at me. That's all it was. Yeah.
I was also stoned as fuck because you were rage watching National Treasure and I was stoned watching Wicker Man, and I was like
yeah.
Anyway.
But Sean and Nicole, thanks for having us on.
Yes, it was really fun.
All right. Well, thanks again for everybody joining us, and goodbye.
I ended up in that hall of yours. There was another girl. She looked like me. Exactly like me.
Can you come with me, Jules?
That'll do.
It happens when the story dies. The evil is set free.
I have to return some videotape.